The second week in a row that I start my sermon in a white van with a bunch of confirmation kids headed up to camp in North Carolina. Last week I talked about when they asked the funny question, are we there yet, right at the beginning. One of the things we do when we travel to camp, we have to stop for 6 meals between the 2 days it takes to go up and the 1 day back, plus gas stops at places that have candy and soda and little souvenirs. And then when we get to camp, they have a camp store. And so we tell the kids and the parents to send them with money, and we make them be responsible for their own money as we go along. And some of them, most of them actually, haven't had to do this before, because middle school kids generally don't have a job and they don't have any kind of cash flow. So some of them, it's the first time they've ever had to keep track of that much money and make decisions as they go along as to how well to use that money. Now, most of the time, they all make it to the last meal still with some cash, but every once in a while there's one that has an empty wallet, right? Because they made some choices along the way and didn't realize that they still had another meal, and so they end up in this place where their choices haven't been the greatest. Now, the whole reason we do this is to begin using this trip as a way of practicing responsibility for themselves and giving them an opportunity to be in that place. And if you think about our culture, when we think about what it means to say be a responsible adult, what kind of things do we think about? Finances, right? So what does it mean to be responsible with your finances? Pay your mortgage. So pay your bills, save up for retirement, don't waste your money on things you don't need if you can't, right? You said save, yes. Groceries, make sure you cover those things. What else, besides finances, what else does it mean to be responsible?
Well, you didn't say learn how to give.
Oh, generosity, yeah. That's a good one. Besides finances? Be on time. Be on time, right? So what does it mean to be responsible with time, besides being on time? Give your time and use it wisely. If you come late to a meeting, what are you doing to somebody else's time? Wasting their time, right? So time it's not just our time, it's other people's time. So we got time, finances, what else can we be responsible for? Children, right? So our relationships in general, how do we live and be responsible? We can get into all kinds of stuff about minding our boundaries and asking for forgiveness and saying sorry and being generous with our hearts and all the rest of that. What about our bodies? Do we have to be responsible for our bodies?
Yes.
How do we do that? Safety?
Go to sleep when your counselors tell you to go to sleep because there's a reason why.
Oh, right. Yeah. So, right, this is another good one. I totally was not thinking about camp anymore, but when you get to camp, right, you got to eat, you got to sleep, you got to do all those things. Exercise, we think about, going to the doctor, all the stuff we have to do to be responsible. And so we've covered finances, our persons, our relationships, our time, our jobs, right? So the way we spend our time and how we do those, not frivolously sitting in your desk or whatever you do for work and not getting work done. So there's all kinds of things that it takes for us to be responsible human beings. Now, if you come to this Bible text that we heard today, Jesus is being pretty judgmental, but for a moment I want to take out the judgmental bit that Jesus is speaking, right? Because all through it, he right away is critical of the scribes for their long flowing robes and critical of the people that give large sums, and he's lifting up this widow. But if you just sort of take out that framework that Jesus lays on top of it, and just think about in our culture today, if someone shows up well-dressed, do we think that is a responsible or irresponsible behavior? Responsible, right? We say you should dress for success and take care of yourself, right? If we think about the ways you can show up in your dress irresponsibly, what might that look like? Sloppy, dirty. We've gotten to a point where with our appearance, tattoos are pretty normal, but there are still tattoos. Like if you get a tattoo on your face, somebody's going to say, well, why did you do that? Now how are you going to get a job, right? So we do have expectations about responsibility of dress. And if you listen to the story, these people come in these long flowing robes and they want to sit in these nice places of honor. But in our culture, if you come in dressed well and there's a seat reserved for you at a banquet, that usually means you've been responsible. You've worked hard, you've earned your money, you've done the things you needed to do, and you've risen to a position, and we like to honor that. This is why we have places of honor at banquets. Likewise, if someone were to come in and give a very large donation in sum, right, total, regardless of how much they have, we would look at that and say that they've been responsible, right? They have done work, they've earned money, they've saved, and they've saved enough that they can still give a lot away, and we appreciate that generosity. And so we could look at that and say these people too have been responsible. Now, when those kids come to camp, if they get all the way to the end and have nothing left to pay for their last meal, we would say they've been irresponsible. And so if you take the widow, if you take the praise of her that Jesus has away, and think about someone having just a couple of bucks and they give it away, we say that's responsible. Because you could use those couple of dollars to at least feed yourself maybe a little bit. And now you've given it away and you have nothing to support yourself. And what do we say about people who have nothing to support themselves? They're responsible, right? And we may not say that out loud, but have you ever looked at a homeless person and thought, there's a responsible person? No. Have you ever looked at someone who's begging and thought, they got their act together? That's not what we do. And we never don't know the story. You don't know how the person got there. But when we think in our culture about the people that dress well and are generous and have everything together, those are the responsible people. And the people that need help from the rest of us, there's at least an implicit understanding that they have been irresponsible. So if we come to this story with that understanding, then you can now take what Jesus has to say and lay it over the top of that. Because Jesus has come into a situation where there are responsible people and someone who has given away everything they have and now is going to need to be taken care of. And that's not responsible in the ways we think about it. And Jesus then looks at them and sees the ones in the long flowing robes and says, it's not about showing up as the best dressed and looking for the places of honor. Those people don't get it yet. And then he sees these people making huge financial gifts. And it's not that he's critical of their gift, right? It's that when this widow comes and gives everything she has, he compliments that and praises that and says she's given it all. Everybody else has given what they can spare, but she has given everything she has. And I think we have to hear this knowing that just last week and right before this in the Gospel of Mark is that first commandment that says you should love the Lord your God with all your whole, all your heart and all your soul and all your mind and all your strength. So that this widow isn't just giving her last 2 coins. She's giving everything to God. Everything that she has. And so if we think about that, I would like to redefine irresponsibility, or add another definition of irresponsibility. Because all of the other ways we can be irresponsible, right? If we're wasting people's time because we're late, if we're being frivolous with our money, if we're not taking care of our body, those are all things that kind of turn toward us with our irresponsibility. But what she does is come in and give everything that she has to the treasury that's going to be used to care for the priests and to care for the people in the community. And so she's giving everything she has in a probably irresponsible way, but it's an irresponsibility that's focused on others. And she gives it all. So in that way, she's wholly, W-H-O-L-L-Y, right? Wholly irresponsible. She's not even being a little bit responsible. She's wholly irresponsible. But then what she's doing is giving that for the sake of others and giving all of herself to God, which makes her irresponsibility holy, H-O-L-Y, right? So she's wholly irresponsible with the way that she's going about her giving of these things. And in doing that, she is trusting God that she will be taken care of and that she will find life in this somehow. It doesn't say in the text that she mopes in there and kind of gives up her last couple of things, right? She maybe does this with joy because this is who she is. If I were to tell you that your child was going to be bullied in school, like you knew 100%, like there was a threat letter that said, if you go to school today, you're going to get beaten up, what would be the responsible thing to do as a parent? Keep them home or call the school, right? There's ways we can get around that. If we had an event today out in the church parking lot, and a car came blow to the parking lot and there was a kid in the way, and you had just time to grab him and pull him out of the way, would that be the responsible thing to do? Of course it would, right? If you think about Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, could he have prevented that? Right, God's all powerful. God could have said, never mind, this death isn't going to happen. God could have pulled Jesus out of there, but God didn't do that. Because God is wholly irresponsible with grace and with life. And that meant becoming a human being, and it meant as becoming a human being, meeting us in the worst things we can come up with as human beings. Jesus experiences the abuse and torture and death on a cross. This is all terrible, horrible stuff that we came up with, and God chose to meet us in those places. That is wholly, wholly irresponsible with Jesus' life. And yet, on the other side of that comes this new life that frees us from all of that horrible stuff we come up with. And Jesus knew that's where that was headed, so he could be wholly, wholly irresponsible with his life so that we could have life. And that life we then are given is one in which should we be responsible in our world? Well, of course we should, because if no one shows up on time and no one saves up money and no one pays their bills, then the place would just be full of chaos. But we can get to a point where responsibility becomes a hindrance to the life that Jesus has given us, right? Because we are also called to live somewhere in this holy, holy irresponsibility where we are not focused on ourselves, but giving of all of our hearts and our mind and our soul and our strength for the sake of others, and somewhere in that space we come alive with this gift of life that Jesus has given us by wholly, wholly giving himself. And I have seen this happen lots of times in lots of places, and it's amazing. My internship congregation had a family, the husband went to India with a pastor on a mission trip just to bless a church that was built, and he was just going along to carry bags. And he was so moved and deeply touched by the people that they met there in this little church that he went home and he convinced his wife that they should sell their house, get a smaller one so they could give more money to this mission in India and all the people's lives that were being touched. Is that responsible retirement planning? It's wholly, wholly irresponsible, absolutely. But is it responsible retirement planning? No. Is it responsible saving up for their 3 kids to go to college? No. Like, I could go down all the ways. We actually had an FBI investigation come because the husband was due for security clearance. And they just said, how do they handle their money? And we qualified it and said, it probably looks irresponsible to you, but it's amazing to us. That they would live in this holy, holy, irresponsible place of just giving away more than they could probably afford to give away. And then in that same congregation, we had a congregational council meeting one time, and we were way behind financially, and the congregation had a revolving line of credit to get through lean summer months, and there was always borrowing that had to happen, and so we had to borrow money to pay the electric bill and borrow money to pay salary to the staff. And the church council was looking at it, and they, in the Constitution and in the budget, had a certain amount of money every year committed to Haiti. And there was this council meeting where there was always a question of, we shouldn't borrow too much, because what if we can't pay it back? And somebody said, well, if we're going to borrow money to pay the electric bill, we've also made a commitment to the children of Haiti. Should we not also borrow money to pay that? Was that financially, fiscally responsible? Of course not. Was it wholly, wholly irresponsible? Yes. But this is also true of our time. Some of you got to see my buddy Pastor Rob when he was here. He works at a hospital as a chaplain, also, in addition to his parish pastor work. And the hospital he works at has a rule for everyone that works there. And that rule is, if you are walking through the hospital and someone needs help, you stop and help them. So the example they have is like if you're on the way to a meeting with the CEO and someone is lost in the hospital and can't find their way, your job is to stop and take them where they need to go and then go to your meeting. Now the CEO is waiting for you. Is that a good use of the CEO's time in our responsible kind of way of being? Not at all. But if you show up to that meeting and the CEO says, where were you? And you say, oh, I was helping somebody get where they needed to go. That's all you have to say. It's the whole culture of the place is to be wholly, wholly irresponsible with your time so that the people that are in that place can, in a place where you come when you're sick and need healing and there's death and all the rest of that, in a place like that to be able to say, that's the most important thing we do here. And we're going to be wasteful of our time if we have to be to make sure that that gets tended to. So this holy, holy irresponsibility is not just about the 2 coins that the woman gives, right? It's about her whole way of being, and it is an invitation to us in life to be generous to a point that it's probably irresponsible, really, if you look at the way we keep track of our finances in our world. And to be generous with our time in a way that is irresponsible, and to be generous with our talents and our resources in a way that is wholly, wholly irresponsible. And when we live in that place, you probably do feel a little bit like you're living on the edge. The widow certainly is. But also, it is that place where you have given your whole mind and heart and strength and soul to God, and somehow Jesus comes into that place and continues to carry us with life. The very life that he gave us with his holy, irresponsible death and resurrection. But that lands us in this place where we can give and know that God loves us and will keep coming to us and finding us and sending us out into the world to be God's holy, irresponsible people that share grace as if it's never running out, because it never is. Amen.